$4,117. That's what's on the screen right now. That's it. That's the whole number. I'm 66 years old. I walked mail routes in Akron, Ohio for 31 years. I sold my house. I rolled over my retirement account. I did everything a careful man is supposed to do. And I am sitting in a studio apartment in Milwaukee, Oregon, looking at a mattress on a metal frame and a window that faces a parking lot. And the sum total of my accessible net worth is $4,000 and change. I'm not going to cry about it. I'm past the crying part. But I need you to sit with that number for a second before I explain how it happened, because the number is the whole point. The number is the thing I need you to feel before you hear the rest. My name is Gary Malone. 3 days a week, I stand on a construction site holding a stop sign in the Oregon drizzle, earning $19.50 an hour, because my Social Security check doesn't quite cover rent plus food, and a man who can still stand can still work, even if his back is telling him otherwise. I started this story with $214,000. I have $4,000 left. The distance between those two numbers, that distance is a woman named Marcy, a house in the Philippines I'll never see again, a green card I paid for, and a text message 11 days after she walked out that said, in its entirety, "Gary, I am sorry. I cannot make you happy." 11 words. That was the closing statement on 31 years of savings and 2 years of my life. I'm not making this video to destroy her. I'm not making this video because I think I'm a victim. I made every decision I'm about to describe. I made them with both hands. I made them in front of God and my own reflection. I'm making this video because somewhere out there right now there is a man exactly like me. Retired, alone, good with money his whole life, suddenly with nothing but time and silence. And he just bought a plane ticket to the Philippines or Thailand. Or maybe he's just on the forum right now looking at pictures and telling himself he's going to that country for the cost of living. And if that man watches this and pauses and thinks for 1 extra minute before he does what I did, then at least something came out of this. Let me tell you exactly how it happened. I want to tell you who I was before I tell you what I did. Because if you don't understand who I was, none of what comes next makes any sense. I walked mail routes in Akron for 31 years. Same neighborhoods, same porches, same dogs that eventually stopped barking at me because even the dogs knew I wasn't a threat. I married Donna in 1983. We were kids, both of us. And we had Brandon and then Kyle, and I thought that was the architecture of a life. The kind you build slowly and don't have to think about too hard. Then in 2002, she left me for a man from her office, quietly, without drama, just packed a life into boxes while I was at work one Tuesday. And the thing that broke me wasn't the anger. I got past the anger. It was the quiet that moved in after. I dated a little in my late 50s, a woman from church who lasted 4 months. A neighbor who made it clear she wasn't interested in anything permanent. By retirement, I had 2 sons with their own houses, their own kids, their own reasons not to call unless a holiday required it. Kyle was in Portland. Brandon was in Phoenix. The calls were dutiful. The visits were rare. I'm not blaming them. They had lives, and I was proud of those lives. But a man who spent 31 years being the person who showed up, who was scheduled, who was needed at a specific address at a specific time, does not know what to do with himself when the schedule disappears overnight. My first Monday as a retired man, I woke up at 6:15 out of pure muscle memory and had nowhere to go. I made coffee. I watched the news. I made more coffee. That was the day. That was the whole day. For 2 years, that was essentially the day. I picked up fishing because someone on a forum said retirees liked fishing. I didn't like fishing. I liked having somewhere to drive to. I sold the Thornton Street house in 2021 because the rooms were too loud with the wrong kind of silence. And I moved into a rental. And I found the Facebook group for senior expats Philippines sometime in the fall of that year. And I told myself I was interested in the cost of living. I wasn't interested in the cost of living. I was interested in the photographs of men who looked like me, sitting at tables, with someone sitting across from them. That's the whole truth of it. That's what a decade of silence does to a man's judgment. Loneliness doesn't make you fall in love with the wrong person. It makes you fall in love with whoever shows up. I landed at Mactan Cebu International Airport on a Tuesday in March 2022, and the heat hit me like a wall the second those doors opened, thick and sweet and nothing like Ohio. And I remember thinking, this place doesn't know me. Nobody here knows me. And for the first time in 2 years, that felt like a relief instead of a punishment. I was 64 years old, and I'd told myself the whole flight it was about the cost of living. I believed about 30% of that. Day 9, Big Dave Kowalski from Toledo, a big red-faced man who'd been living in Cebu for 4 years and seemed to know every bar stool in La Hogue, introduced me to Marcy at a place called Privé on Mango Avenue. She came in with a friend. She was 27 years old, and I want to be honest about that number because the number matters. Not for the reason people assume, not vanity, but because 27 means she had the energy to be fully present in a way that no one had been fully present with me in longer than I could accurately calculate. She laughed at things I said, actual laughing, not polite laughing. She asked about my sons, and when I mentioned Brandon and Kyle by name, she used those names again 3 days later on our second meeting, unprompted, naturally, the way a person does when they were actually listening and not just waiting for their turn to speak. I cannot tell you how long it had been since anyone remembered something I told them. She wasn't loud about it. She wasn't performing. That's the thing I need you to understand, because it's the thing I couldn't defend against. She was quiet about it. She was warm and soft-spoken, and she asked about my mail route the way someone asks about a thing they actually want to picture. And she asked about Donna, why it ended, what I wished had gone differently. And she just listened without flinching or steering the conversation somewhere easier. On our 5th night together, she told me she'd been praying for someone like me. I knew that was a line. I want you to hear me say that clearly. I knew it was a line when she said it. But knowing a thing is a line and not feeling the effect of that line are two entirely different experiences when you are 64 years old and you have been a ghost in your own house for a decade. She called me Daddy Gary in front of her friends, and I was embarrassed by it, and I was quietly, helplessly undone by it at the same time. She made rice and fish for breakfast without being asked in my rented apartment in La Hogue, standing at the stove in the morning light. And I sat at that kitchen table and felt, for the first time since I stopped walking mail routes, like a man who was expected somewhere. That's what she sold me. Not romance, not beauty. Expectation. The feeling of being a person whose presence in a room was wanted. Loneliness doesn't make you fall in love with the wrong person. It makes you fall in love with whoever shows up. And she showed up. She showed up every single day, and I never stood a chance. The first transfer didn't feel like a transfer. That's the thing I need you to understand before I give you the numbers. Because if I hand you the numbers without that context, they look like stupidity. And it wasn't stupidity. It was architecture. It was a man picking up bricks one at a time and calling it a foundation. By my second visit to Cebu in July 2022, I had already sent $2,400 to the Philippines, $800 for Lorelei's university tuition at the University of the Visayas, $600 for Nanita's hospital visit at Changhua, and a 4-month supply of her diabetes medication. And $1,000 I logged in my head as helping out, which is what a man calls money he can't categorize because categorizing it would force him to see it clearly. I told myself a man who can afford to help people he cares about and doesn't help them is a worse kind of poor than broke. And I believed that, and it cost me $2,400 to believe it. Then came September 2022, and Marcy called me calm as a Sunday morning and told me the landlord in Consolacion was selling the property, and the family had nowhere to go, and she said she hated to ask. She said she'd looked everywhere. and there was a concrete two-bedroom structure available for $18,500 USD, and maybe they could put it in her mother's name for now, just to stabilize things. And then when I came back, we'd figure it out together. I wired the $18,500 in 72 hours. I want you to sit with that pace. 72 hours to wire the largest single sum I had ever sent to another human being on the other side of the planet, into a house I had never seen, titled to a woman I had met 6 months prior. I told myself it was an investment. I told myself I was going to marry this woman, and that house was going to be where her mother lived, and I was going to be the kind of man who takes care of his wife's family, the kind of man who shows up, which is the only kind of man I had ever known how to be. That's the gymnastics. That's what it sounds like from inside the head of a man doing it. It sounds like integrity. It sounds like love. It sounds like the responsible thing. Then Rodell needed $4,800 for the Sorry Sorry store in Consolacion. Just enough capital to open. He was so close. And I met Rodell. I shook his hand. I saw the half-built structure with my own eyes on my third trip. And a half-built thing that just needs finishing is not an abstraction. It's a physical argument you can touch. And I wired the $4,800 and told myself I was investing in a small business. Lorelei's tuition came around again. 3 semesters total. Another $1,600 on top of the first $800. Nonita's medication cycled every 4 months, and over 18 months that added up to $3,100. And I never once hesitated because I had met this woman. I had eaten food she cooked. I had watched her shuffle to the bathroom in plastic slippers. And you do not tell a diabetic grandmother no, because a spreadsheet is telling you to. The informal transfers, the for groceries and for emergencies, and Danica needs her school uniform, and the tricycle broke. Those came to $9,800 over the course of the relationship, which sounds like a lot until you realize that's 19 months of small moments where a woman you love texts you a problem, and you have the ability to solve it, and you solve it, because that is what love looks like from the inside when you have been alone for a decade. I wasn't stupid. I was hungry, and a hungry man will eat whatever's on the table and call it a feast. By the time I paid the K-1 attorney in Honolulu $4,200, the USCIS fees and her medical clearance another $1,870, and the civil ceremony at Cebu City Hall plus the small reception, $3,900. I had spent $66,790 in 20 months, and I called it building something. I came home from Fred Meyer on July 19th with 2 bags of groceries, chicken thighs, rice, a box of green tea she liked. And I knew before I set the bags down. I knew the way you know a room has changed before you can name what's missing. Her shoes weren't by the door. That was the first thing. Just the small pair of white rubber sandals she wore around the apartment. Gone. I walked to the bedroom, and the closet was half its usual weight, her side a row of empty wire hangers swinging slightly, like something had just passed through. Her toiletries were gone from the bathroom shelf. The gold jewelry box I bought her at a mall in Cebu City, a stupid little thing, cost me $40. She said she loved it. Gone. I stood in the bathroom for a long time holding the edge of the sink, looking at the space where that box had been. And I called her phone and it went straight to voicemail. And I called again and again. And then I sat down on the kitchen floor because my legs just stopped. They simply stopped working. I'm 66 years old and I sat on a linoleum kitchen floor with 2 bags of groceries next to me. And I called her one more time and listened to her voicemail message and hung up. I didn't move for probably 40 minutes. There was nothing in me that was capable of movement. I had wired this woman's family $18,500. I had paid for 3 years of her sister's tuition. I had stood at Cebu City Hall in a white shirt and said vows in front of a judge and her mother and 2 of her sisters. And I had meant every word I said, and she had said words back. And I had believed those words. I had bet my life on those words. And she was in Beaverton, Oregon. I found out 6 days later from an immigration paralegal, in a room arranged by a woman named Ate Rosa. And there was a man, 29 years old, working a warehouse job in Hillsboro. And she had been in contact with him since January, 2 months before she'd even landed at PDX. 2 months before she'd walked off that jet bridge and smiled at me in the arrivals hall like I was the answer to something. I found that out from public Facebook posts. She had been talking to him the whole time she was learning to drive in Oregon, the whole time I was paying her ESL classes, the whole time I was adding her to my health insurance. She had been talking to him while I was sleeping next to her. 11 days after she left, she sent me a text, not a call, a text, and it said, "Gary, I am sorry. I cannot make you happy. I think it is better if we separate. Please do not try to contact my family." I read it standing in the parking lot outside my building in the drizzle. I read it 4 times. And the worst part, the part that will stay with me longer than the money, is that I texted back. I said, "Please just talk to me." She never answered. So here's the number, the final, actual, honest-to-God number. $66,790 spent in the Philippines. The house, the store, the tuition, the flights, the medications, the wedding, the attorney. Every informal transfer, I told myself, was generosity and not desperation. And then another $21,250 during the 4 months she lived in this country and slept in my bed and let me believe I had finally gotten something right. And then $3,800 for a divorce attorney to formalize the thing she already knew was over before her flight landed. And the grand total is $91,840. And I started with $214,000. And I have $4,117 left in liquid savings, and $118,000 still sitting in an IRA that I have not touched yet, but will almost certainly begin pulling from within the next 18 months, because $19.50 an hour 3 days a week and $16.40 a month from Social Security is not a retirement. It is a holding pattern above a runway I can already see coming up fast. I am not going to tell you she was evil. I am not going to tell you Filipino women are this or that, because this story isn't about her nationality. It's about my hunger, and my hunger had nothing to do with where she was from. She got her green card and I got the bill. 31 years of mail routes for a mattress on a frame and a parking lot view. That's the trade I made. Both hands, wide awake. So if you are watching this right now and you are on that forum, or you just bought a ticket, or you are wiring money to a woman you met 9 weeks ago because her mother is sick and her landlord is selling the property, I need you to hear me say this and mean it. The loneliness you are feeling is real, and it is not a small thing, and I am not going to tell you it isn't, but that loneliness is a wound. And a wound that size will make you call anything that touches it gently a cure. And it is not a cure. It is just the next thing that found you bleeding. Get that wound looked at before you wire a single dollar, before you book a single flight, before you let someone call you daddy anything in front of their friends and feel yourself go warm and quiet inside. If this video hit you somewhere true, hit the like button. It helps more people find it before they make the decisions I made. Subscribe if you want to hear what a man sounds like when he's done lying to himself. And leave me a comment. Tell me if you've been here. Tell me what you saw in yourself in this story. Because I spent 2 years thinking I was the only one, and I wasn't, and neither are you.